viewers, US President Donald Trump is widening his hardline stance toward Latin America. Trump issued sharp warnings to Colombia, Cuba and Mexico. The remarks come as a US operation captured Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro and brought him to New York on drug trafficking charges. Trump suggested possible military action against Colombia, blaming it for cocaine flowing into the US. He also said Cuba may be close to collapse and could fall without US intervention. Trump also criticized Mexico, saying it must get its acts together. The comments signal a more confrontational US posture across the US and the Americas. Let's listen in to US President's comments.
Now, we have a very sick neighbor. It's not a neighbor, but it's close to a neighbor, and that's Venezuela. It's very sick. Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
What does that mean? He's not going to be doing it very long?
He's not doing it very long. He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an operation by the U.S. and
It sounds good to me, yeah. You know why? Because they kill a lot of people, yeah. You have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. We'd love Mexico to do it. They're capable of doing it, but unfortunately the cartels are very strong in Mexico.
All right, now joining me in this discussion is Andrew K.P. Leong, who's a China strategist, and he joins us from Hong Kong. Thanks, Mr. Leong, for joining me in this discussion. Now, of course, we have all been noting everything that's happening in Venezuela, but what's next for the other countries that Trump has just spoken about? Mexico, Cuba, Colombia, should they be threatened?
Well, this is, of course, part of President Trump's ambition by turning the entire Western Hemisphere. That includes North America, including Canada, including Greenland, but also South America, the entire South America, including Venezuela and Colombia and so on, into a sphere of dominance by the United States, harking back to the old historic Monroe Doctrine. You can now call it the Donald Doctrine now. And then and his Secretary of State said to the abduction, the kidnapping of another country's leader is not an innovation, and therefore it doesn't require congressional approval. Well, that reminds me of a very ancient Chinese saying that an emperor can just point to a deer and said it's a horse. I think that this is I think that it is a great deal of disrespect to people's common sense and rationality, and it's throwing the credibility and respectability of the American leadership into the gutters. All he wants, of course, is to seize other countries' resources. In this case, Venezuela's huge oil reserves, which is the largest in the world, larger than the Saudi Arabia. But of course, all these small countries cannot compete or cannot defend the might of American military power. But I think that he's underestimating the resistance of the people themselves, because no people would like to be under the thumb of another country. Nationalism runs high in most of the countries, be it in Mexico or in Venezuela or in Colombia. As far as Venezuela is concerned, it's also a failed state because Maduro government is not very popular and it's of course highly corrupt and also involved in drugs, but it's still it is a country bound together by various internal dynamics, and a lot of the people in Venezuela do not want to be the slaves of another country. And then, of course, Colombia is a very large country, is about 3.7 times the size of the United Kingdom, even though this population is only about half of the United Kingdom, something like 30 million. But still, it's a large country, but also the institutions are all broken. And they're bound together by cartels, resistance, militias, all sorts of factions. And to think that President Trump can run such a country is a little bit far-fetched. I think that
Okay.
if it continues on this path, he could be walking into the quagmire, not unlike the earlier examples of Afghanistan and the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, thinking that the United States could just change the governance of another country. Look what happened in Afghanistan. Look what happened in Iraq, in the Iraq war. And then this has these two adventures caused thousands and millions of people's deaths, but also huge cost to the American taxpayer, and dragging down the America for aid for years. And that's why countries like China and Russia are not thinking of immediate military intervention, because that would, of course, pitch the nuclear powers into the possibility of a world war. But of course, relying on the platform of the United Nations to expose this hypocrisy, and then the lack of respectability of the American leadership, knowing full well that that's not going to end Trump's actions, but gradually allowing Trump just to stew in his folly. And of course, as far as the Venezuela situation is concerned, he was belittling the lady, a politician who won the election, but was sidelined by Maduro, and who eventually got the Nobel Peace Prize. Obviously, she had enough political support, but then Trump doesn't believe in her because she is not necessarily wanting to be
Do
under
you
the
think
thumb.
this entire invasion was actually because of the petrodollar, not about democracy, not about drugs, not about terrorism, but real threat that Trump was seeing was that of petrodollar, because Venezuela had now started to import its oil in rubles and yuan and not in dollar?
Well, the so-called petrodollar is long gone. I mean, the petrodollar was born because the United States used to be the biggest energy customer, and then buying almost the bulk of the Middle East oil. And then at that time, when at the period, a era of unipolarity, imposing his will on the Arab Peninsula, and then mandating the sale of oil must be in a dollar, and that led to the birth of the petrodollar. But now, America is now the world's exporter, is a competitor. It's no longer an energy importer. The biggest energy importer in the world is China. The biggest still remains the biggest customer. So that's why the Middle East is pivoting towards China, because America is no longer the biggest customer, or not even the competitor, as far as energy export is concerned. So gone are the days of the petrodollar. But of course, with Venezuela, a lot of the reserves are still underground. Even though China is biggest customer of oil, but the sale of Venezuelan oil to China only accounts for only about 5%, not 50%, 5% only, because China gets its oil from Russia, from the Middle East, and so on. So it's not going to hurt China. But then Trump has also said, well, only yesterday, saying that, oh, okay, I mean, he's a very good friend of President Xi, and then what's happening in Venezuela is not going to hurt China interest, because Venezuela is going to sell its oil to China as well. Now think about it. The United States doesn't lack oil. The United States is the world's biggest oil producer. He wants the money. And where do you get the money? The biggest customer in the world is China. And so the talk about the petrodollar, and then of course when China buys oil, it's unlikely to be in dollar, but because it's only 5% of China's energy needs. And of course, the China's trading in oil with Russia and Saudi Arabia are increasingly in their mutual currencies. You think about it. I mean, if one country buys a large amount of energy from another, like between Saudi Arabia and China, why do they need the US dollar? Because that would slow the process, and it will increase cost. And why just trade on their own respective currencies? So this talk about petrodollar is a bit of overhype now. But of course, Trump wants to restore the dominance of the dollar. But it's not just the dollar. He wants all the resources. He wants to grow the Americans' influence throughout the Western Hemisphere. As I said, want to double down on the old Monroe Doctrine to make it become the Donald Doctrine, controlling the entire Western Hemisphere.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Leong, for your response. We do continue to